The morning my daughter changed the locks on the house I grew up in, she didn't even have the decency to tell me herself. I found out from the locksmith, a young man with kind eyes who looked like he wanted to disappear when I pulled into the driveway and tried my key and it wouldn't turn. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm so sorry. I was told the homeowner wanted everything rekeyed." The homeowner? My name is Hazel. I'm 67 years old, and that house on Birchwood Lane had been in my family since 1948, when my father came back from the war and built it board by board with his own two hands. And on that cold October morning, standing on the porch I had sweat 10,000 times, I learned that I was no longer welcome in it. Let me back up, because you deserve to understand how a mother ends up locked out of her own life. I have one daughter. Her name is Margot, and she was the light of my world for 34 years. After my husband passed, a heart attack sudden, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday 11 years ago. It was just the two of us. We held each other up. She'd come over on Sundays and we'd make her grandmother's pot roast and watch old movies until we both fell asleep on the couch. I sewed the dress she wore to her college graduation. When she got her first real job at an accounting firm in Columbus, I drove 2 hours just to take her to lunch and tell her how proud I was. That was the kind of thing we did for each other. Then she met Trevor. I want to be fair about Trevor, because bitterness has a way of rewriting history, and I don't want to do that. He was charming the first time I met him. Good handshake, looked me in the eye, complimented my apple pie and asked for the recipe, but there was something underneath it I couldn't name back then. A way he had of glancing at things. The silver, the antique clock on the mantel, the deed to the property when it sat on the kitchen table, like he was running numbers in his head. I told myself I was being a suspicious old woman. I told myself I should be grateful my daughter had found someone. They married 2 years ago in a ceremony I paid most off for, and almost immediately the Sunday dinners stopped. "We're just so busy, Mum," Margot would say. "Trevor's got big plans for us." The big plans, as it turned out, involved my house. It started small, the way these things do. Trevor would mention over dinner, on the rare occasions I was invited, how much a property like mine was worth now. "Birchwood Lane's gotten hot," he'd say, swirling his wine. "You're sitting on 400 grand easy, Hazel. Maybe more with the acreage." I'd just smile and change the subject. The house wasn't a number to me. It was the kitchen where my mother taught me to can tomatoes. It was the doorframe where my father penciled my height every birthday. Mark's still there under 60 years of paint. Then came the suggestions. Gentle at first. Maybe I should think about downsizing. Maybe the house was too much for me to handle alone. Maybe I'd be happier in one of those nice senior communities with the activities and the meals provided. Margot started saying it too, and that's when it began to hurt, because I could hear Trevor's words coming out of my own daughter's mouth. "I'm not lonely, sweetheart," I told her once. "I'm content. There's a difference. Mum, you fell on the stairs in March. I tripped on a shoe. Anyone could have. What if next time we don't find out for days?" It sounded like concern. I understand now it was rehearsal. The thing they didn't know, the thing that mattered more than they realized, was what my late husband had set up before he died. We were never wealthy people, but we were careful ones. Walter put the house and the property into a trust, with me as the sole trustee for as long as I lived and was of sound mind. He'd done it after watching his own mother get fleeced by a second husband in her final years. "Nobody takes your home, Hazel," he told me. "Not the bank, not a stranger, not anybody. You decide what happens to this place, and only you." At the time, I'd thought it was overly cautious. Walter, the worrier. Now I understood he'd been protecting me from a future neither of us could have imagined. The locks got changed in October, like I said. Here's how that happened. Margot and Trevor had been pushing for me to sign something. A power of attorney, they called it. Just for emergencies, Mum, so we can help with the bills if you ever can't. Trevor brought over a folder of papers one evening and slid them across my own kitchen table with a pen on top. I'm old, but I'm not foolish. I told him I'd like my attorney to look at them first. The temperature in that room dropped 20 degrees. Your attorney, Trevor repeated, like I'd said something insulting. Hazel, we're family. You don't need to lawyer up against your own family. Then you won't mind if my lawyer reads it, I said. Margot wouldn't meet my eyes. And I knew, the way you know a storm is coming by the smell of the air, that something had already been set in motion that I hadn't seen. I took those papers to Edmund Pratt, who'd been my husband's attorney and then mine for 30 years. He read them twice, took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose for a long moment. Hazel, he said, this isn't a power of attorney for emergencies. This document, if you'd signed it, would have given your son-in-law authority to manage and dispose of your assets, including the house. He paused. It also includes language that would let them petition to have you declared incapable of managing your own affairs. They were setting up to take guardianship. I sat there in his office and felt the floor tilt. Guardianship. They wanted a court to say I was no longer fit to run my own life so they could run it for me, straight into a sale and a check with Trevor's name on it. There's something else, Edmund said gently. Have you been to the house recently? Checked your mail? I hadn't, not in a few days. When I drove home that afternoon, the locks were already changed. The locksmith with the kind eyes. The homeowner wanted everything rekeyed. Margot had a key, of course. I'd given her 1 year ago for emergencies. She'd let the locksmith in. My own daughter had stood in my kitchen and arranged to lock me out. I want to tell you that I screamed, that I pounded on the door. I didn't. I stood on that porch for a long minute, and then I drove to a motel out on Route 9, the kind with a flickering sign and a coffee maker bolted to the wall. And I sat on the edge of the bed, and I called my daughter. She answered on the 4th ring. Mom. Her voice was careful. Coached. You changed the locks, I said. Trevor thought it would be safer. There'd been break-ins in the area, and you leave the side door unlocked half the time. Margot. I closed my eyes. I'm your mother. You locked me out of my home. It's not safe for you there alone, Mum. We talked about this. We're trying to help you by stealing my house. Nobody's stealing anything. God, you always do this. You always make us the villains. We're trying to take care of you, and you fight us every step. She was crying now, but they were angry tears, the kind that come when someone's been told a story so many times they've started to believe it. Trevor says you're not being rational, that this is exactly what he was worried about, Trevor says. There it was. Have you ever heard your child speak in someone else's voice? It is one of the loneliest sounds in the world. I didn't argue. I'd learned long ago that you cannot argue someone out of a position they didn't reason their way into. All right, I said quietly. All right, Margot. And I hung up. That night in that ugly little motel room, I didn't sleep, but somewhere around 3 in the morning, watching the headlights sweep across the ceiling, I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started thinking clearly for the first time in months. They believed I was a confused old woman who'd roll over. They had no idea the house was in a trust they had no power over. They'd built their whole plan on a foundation that didn't exist. The next morning I called Edmund and I said 3 words I'd been too sentimental to say for 2 years. Let's protect it. Now, I could have called the police that very day. I could have had the locks changed back, pressed charges, dragged my daughter into a courtroom. Part of me wanted to. But she was still my child. And I needed to understand something first. I needed to know whether the daughter I raised was truly gone or just lost somewhere under all of Trevor's whispering. So I did something that surprised even me. I invited them to dinner. I called Margot a week later, after Edmund had quietly filed the paperwork reaffirming the trust and documenting everything, after I'd gotten a full medical and cognitive evaluation putting in writing that I was sharp as a tack. Edmund's idea, and a good one. I made my voice warm. I made it small. Sweetheart, I've been thinking. Maybe I have been stubborn. Maybe you and Trevor are right, and I need to think about the future. Come to dinner Friday. Let's talk it through as a family. You should have heard how fast her voice changed. The relief in it. Oh, Mom. Yes. Yes, of course. Trevor will be so glad. I'll bet he will, I thought. I had a key to my own house again by then. Edmund saw to that, since legally they never had the right to bar the trustee from the trust property in the first place. I spent Friday afternoon cooking the way I used to. Pot roast the real way, my mother's recipe, with the carrots and the pearl onions. Cornbread. An apple pie because I knew Trevor would expect it and I wanted him comfortable. I set the table with the good china. They arrived at 6. Margot hugged me too tightly, the way you hug someone when you're trying to convince yourself everything's fine. Trevor shook my hand and looked around the dining room with that appraiser's glance I'd finally learned to recognize for what it was. We ate. We made small talk. Trevor was expansive, generous, already spending money he thought was about to be his. He talked about a wonderful community in Arizona, 55 and over, golf cart paths, a clubhouse. We'd visit all the time, Hazel. And honestly, the equity from this place, you'd be set. You'd never have to worry about a furnace or a roof again. It does sound nice, I said, and watched him relax. Margot excused herself to the restroom partway through dessert. She was gone a while. When I went to check on her, old habit, a mother checks, I found her not in the bathroom, but in Walter's old study, standing at his desk with her phone out, photographing the documents in the drawer. The trust papers. She froze when she saw me in the doorway. Mum, you were sent to find out what I have, I said. It wasn't a question. Her face crumpled. And for just a second, just one, I saw my little girl in there. The one who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms. He just wanted to know if there was a will. Or... She stopped. Mum, he says, if you put the house in some kind of trust, he'll never be able to... That you'll have cut us out, and I'll have to choose. Choose between your husband and your mother. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I took the phone gently out of her hand and set it on the desk. Let me tell you what's in those papers, Margot, so nobody has to sneak around in the dark for it. Your father put this house in a trust before he died. I am the trustee for as long as I live. No power of attorney, no signature, no guardianship petition Trevor cooks up can touch it. He cannot make me sell. He cannot make you make me sell. There is nothing here for him. I watched it land. Your father did that because he loved me, and because, even 15 years ago, he was a better judge of character than I gave him credit for. We went back to the table. I sat down, folded my hands, and looked Trevor square in the eye. I've decided, I said pleasantly, not to move to Arizona. He started to smile, thinking I meant I wasn't ready yet, that there was still room to work on me. The house is in an irrevocable family trust, I went on. Has been since before Walter died. I'm the trustee. It cannot be sold, mortgaged, or transferred while I'm alive. And when I'm gone, it passes according to terms I set. Not you, Trevor. Not anyone you can lean on. I let that sit. I had my attorney refile everything this week. And I have a doctor's letter, dated 3 days ago, stating that I am of completely sound mind. So if you were planning to tell a judge I'm too feeble to know what I'm doing, I'd save your money. The colour drained out of his face and then rushed back in red. You set us up. No, I said. You set yourselves up. I just declined to fall. What happened next I will not pretend was satisfying in the way I'd imagined at 3 in the morning in that motel room. There was no triumph in it. Trevor stood up so fast his chair tipped over. He called me names I won't repeat. He turned on Margot. I told you to handle this. This was supposed to be handled. And in the way he spoke to her, snarling, contemptuous, like she was an employee who'd botched a job, I saw my daughter finally see him too. Saw the thing I'd seen at that first dinner and couldn't name. The numbers running behind the eyes. He left. Slammed the door so hard the height marks on the door frame seemed to tremble. Margot stayed sitting at the table, my pot roast going cold in front of her, and she put her face in her hands and she sobbed. I didn't rush to comfort her. I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. I've been locked out of my own home. I let the silence do its work. Finally, she said into her hands, I don't know who I am anymore. I know exactly who you are, I said. You're my daughter. You got lost. It happens. The question is whether you want to find your way back. She did. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't clean. She filed for divorce that winter, and Trevor did not go quietly. He came after her for half of everything, and learned the hard way that there was a great deal less everything than he'd been counting on. Turned out he'd been deep in debt the whole time, and my house was meant to be the lifeboat. Without it, he sank. Last I heard, he'd moved to Florida and married a widow with a paid-off condo. Some men have a type, and the type is lonely woman who owns property. Margot moved back in with me for a while, into her old bedroom with the height marks on the door frame, while she got back on her feet. We were careful with each other at first, the way you are with something that's been broken and glued. But slowly the Sunday dinners came back, the old movies, the pot roast. One evening, she looked up from the dishes and said, Mum, I'm so sorry. I let him make me believe you were the problem. I know, sweetheart, I said. He's good at that. It's the only thing he was ever good at. That was 4 years ago. Margot is 38 now. She runs her own small bookkeeping business, the irony of which is not lost on either of us. She keeps other people's finances honest for a living. She remarried last spring to a high school science teacher named Walter, if you can believe it. Different Walter. Kind eyes. Terrible jokes. Looks at my daughter like she hung the moon and has never once, not one single time, glanced at my silver. They had a baby in February. A little girl. They named her Hazel. She's 3 months old and she has a grandmother's stubborn chin, and last Sunday her mother laid her in my arms on the porch where my father penciled my height 70 years ago, and I rocked her while the light went gold over the birch trees out back. The house is still mine. It'll be Margot's when I'm gone. And then little Hazel's, the trust holding it safe through the generations the way Walter intended. Too far down the line for any charming man with running numbers behind his eyes to ever reach. I keep my father's old skeleton key on a ribbon by the door, not because it opens anything anymore, but to remind me. A home is not a number. A family is not a transaction. And a mother who looks soft is not the same thing as a mother who is weak. I'm Hazel. I'm 67 years old. I was locked out of my own house by the daughter I raised, and I want you to hear this part most of all. I didn't win her back by being cruel, and I didn't keep my home by being lucky. I kept it because a man who loved me thought ahead, and I won her back because I refused to stop being her mother even when she'd stopped, for a while, being my daughter. If you take one thing from an old woman tonight, let it be this: protect what's yours. Sign nothing you haven't read, and never, ever let anyone convince you that loving your family means handing them the keys to your life. You can keep both. I did. I've thought a lot in the quiet years since about how a person ends up standing on the porch of her own childhood home with a key that no longer turns. It didn't happen all at once. It happened the way water wears down stone, one suggestion, one for your own good, one small surrender at a time. Trevor never had to break anything down. He just kept pushing on the soft places until my daughter forgot which side of the door she belonged on. And I let some of it happen too because I confused keeping the peace with keeping my family. I learned too late to spare us all the pain. That silence in the face of someone chipping away at you is not patience. It's permission. What saved me wasn't anger, and it wasn't luck. It was that my Walter thought ahead when the rest of us were busy trusting the wrong people. He looked at a future he couldn't see and built a wall around the thing that mattered, and that foresight outlived him by 15 years. There's a kind of wisdom that isn't loud. It doesn't argue, it doesn't plead, it just quietly makes sure that when the storm comes, the house is still standing. I try to live by that now. Read the papers, ask the questions. Keep your wits about you even when the people you love are telling you that thinking clearly is the same as being cold. But knowing the truth wasn't enough on its own. I had to find the backbone to act on it, to drive to Edmund's office, to refile what needed refiling, to sit across a dinner table from a man who wanted my home and not let my hands shake. That took something harder than cleverness. It took the stubborn refusal to be made small in my own life. I'd spent 2 years being told I was confused, fragile, a burden. The hardest thing I ever did was decide not to believe them. And here's the part I hold on to most. I never stopped being Margot's mother, even when she stopped, for a while, being my daughter. I didn't win her back by punishing her. I won her back by refusing to become bitter, by leaving a door open even after mine had been locked. Being right is easy. Staying kind while you're being right, that's the whole of it. That's where character actually lives. If you're listening to this and someone is telling you that your home, your savings, your dignity would be better off in their hands, I want you to hear an old woman clearly. Love does not require you to disappear. The people who truly love you will never ask you to sign away your life to prove it. Protect what's yours. Think before you trust, and stand up straight, even when standing up costs you something. Because a mother who looks soft is not the same as a mother who is weak.